In the middle of the Sahara Desert, something impossible was standing in the sand, a giant ear of corn. But this was not normal corn. The kernels were deep purple, dark, glossy, almost black under the desert sun. It looked more like a gemstone than food. When the husk was peeled back, row after row of shining purple kernels appeared, perfectly formed, heavy, dense, alive. For thousands of years, this part of the Sahara grew nothing, only heat, only wind, only dry, endless sand. Yet somehow, purple corn had grown here, and not just a little, an entire field. Tall green stalks rising from one of the harshest places on Earth. Farmers were stunned. Scientists wanted answers. How could a crop like this survive in a desert? To understand what happened, we need to go back to the beginning. Day 1. The land was empty, a place where almost nothing had grown for nearly 1,000 years. But a small team arrived with a strange idea. They wanted to grow purple corn in the Sahara Desert. The first days were silent. The desert gave no sign of mercy. The sun burned all day. The sand stayed hot even at night. Nothing moved. No green, no life. Many people believed the seeds would never survive. Corn needs water. Corn needs stable soil, and the Sahara gives almost neither. But beneath the sand, something had changed. The dark soil held moisture. The black irrigation pipes began their quiet work. Each morning, a few drops of water entered the trench, slowly, carefully, not enough to flood the ground, just enough to keep the seeds alive. Days passed. The wind kept blowing. The heat did not stop. Then one morning, a tiny green shoot appeared, small, thin, fragile, but alive. A corn sprout rising from the Sahara Desert. The experiment had begun. The tiny sprouts survived, and once they survived, they began to grow fast. Every morning, the black pipes released a little more water. Not much, just enough to feed the roots below the surface. The corn plants responded quickly. Thin green stems became taller. New leaves unfolded, then more leaves, then more. Soon the small plants no longer looked fragile. They looked determined. Day by day, the rows became greener. The once empty trench began to disappear under leaves. Then the stalks grew higher, ankle height, knee height, waist height. The change was hard to believe. Green corn plants were now rising from the orange desert sand. The Sahara was still dry, still hot, still dangerous, but the farm was no longer empty. It was becoming alive, and the tallest plants were only just beginning. The corn kept rising. Soon the stalks were taller than the farmers. Long green leaves reached into the dry desert air. The field moved gently in the wind, like a green wave in the middle of the sand. Then the next sign appeared. At the top of each stalk, soft golden tassels began to form. This meant the plants were entering a new stage. The flowers had arrived. Soon after, something even stranger appeared. Thin silk threads began to grow from the sides of the plants, but these were not normal silk threads. They were darker, richer. Some looked deep red, some looked almost purple. That was the first sign that this crop was different, very different. Inside each husk, something unusual was beginning to form. The farmers watched carefully, because what was growing inside those green husks might change everything. The silk grew thicker, the husks became heavier, and inside those green layers, the corn was beginning to form. At first, the cobs were small, easy to hide in the leaves, but week by week, they became larger. The farmers could feel the change with their hands. Each husk was growing denser, fuller, heavier. The field no longer looked like an experiment. It looked like a real harvest. But this harvest was strange. Some husks felt much larger than normal, much heavier. The farmers began checking them one by one. They moved carefully through the rows, touching each stalk, watching for damage from the desert heat. Then they found one, a single husk, far larger than the rest, longer, thicker, heavier. Something unusual was growing inside, and whatever it was still getting bigger. The giant husk was finally ready. The farmers carried it out from the field. Carefully, slowly, it was heavier than anyone expected. The green outer layers were thick, tight, almost swollen. For a moment, nobody touched it, because this was the moment of truth. If the experiment had failed, the inside could still be empty, dry, damaged by heat. But if it had worked, something extraordinary was waiting inside. One farmer reached forward. Slowly, the outer leaves were pulled back. The first rows of kernels appeared, dark purple, shiny, perfectly formed. Then more and more, row after row of deep purple corn filled the cob, dense, heavy, almost unreal under the desert sun. The field had not just produced corn, it had produced something rare, something beautiful, and something the world was about to see. The giant purple corn did not remain a secret long. One of the farmers recorded the reveal, the heavy husk, the dark kernels, the strange color shining in the desert light. Soon the video began to spread. At first, only a few people saw it, then farmers, then scientists, then millions of viewers around the world. Many thought the footage was fake. Purple corn growing in the Sahara Desert? It sounded impossible. But the images were real, the field was real, and the harvest was real. Scientists began asking serious questions. How did the plants survive the heat? Why were the kernels so rich in color? Could other rare crops grow here too? The small desert farm that once looked forgotten was now becoming a place of global attention, and the purple corn was only the beginning. The color of the corn was not random. Purple corn gets its dark color from natural plant pigments. These pigments are called anthocyanins. They're the same pigments that give color to blueberries, blue cabbage, and black rice. But in the Sahara, something unusual may have happened. The intense sunlight, the dry air, the extreme heat, all of it placed stress on the plants, and sometimes plant stress can change how strongly color develops. At the same time, the dark soil helped protect the roots. The black irrigation pipes delivered water slowly and directly, so the plants stayed alive, while still fighting the harsh desert environment above. That balance may have pushed the corn to grow with even deeper color, richer, darker, more dramatic. The purple corn was not just surviving the desert, it was responding to it, and that made the harvest even more extraordinary. What happened in this field was bigger than one strange crop. The purple corn proved something important. The Sahara is not completely empty. It is difficult, harsh, unforgiving, but not impossible. If rare crops can survive here, then other crops might survive too. And if crops can survive, then entire farming systems might be built in places once thought useless. Small trenches could become larger fields could become desert farms, and desert farms could become part of the future of food. This does not mean the Sahara will become green overnight, but it does mean something has changed. The desert is no longer just a place where plants die. Now it may also be a place where new agriculture begins. And all of that started with one impossible field and one giant ear of purple corn.